Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Friday Football Show with myself, Tim Benz, and Mike DeCourcy. Glad that you're with us. Hope you enjoyed episode number 1 last week. Nobody complained to the point that we're not back, so here we are with week number 2 in the preseason as the Steelers get ready to take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers Saturday night at Acrisure Stadium. Mike, of course, from the Sporting News, and you can read me at Breakfast with Ben's Daily here at Trib Live. You can also check out Mike at Fox and at the Big Ten Network as well. And we're brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar on the North Shore. Try one of their 500 available craft beers, grab some food, including the fabulous Steak and a Stone, and watch Pittsburgh sports all season long in one of their many big screen TVs directly across from PNC Park at the end of the Clemente Bridge. Meet me at Mike's. I was just there earlier in the week. They had their big kickoff for the Pittsburgh Marathon, sign-up day number 1. They had a huge party on the Clemente Bridge, and everybody was going over to Mike's. It was really crowded for a random Wednesday night with nothing going on across the street at the ballpark. I had myself a pork on a stone, so it was just as good. You can have seafood on a stone, and I had some great craft beers as well. So I always recommend Mike's, always would, even if they weren't sponsoring the show, but they are, and we're very happy about that. And we're happy to get on to week number 2. And Mike, we'll start the way that we're always going to start, with the view from Mount Washington, the 30,000-foot big picture state of the Steelers heading into game day. Why don't you start on this one?
Yeah, the big story with the Steelers over the last several days has been the Cam Hayward hold in. And there has been a lot of consternation in Steeler Nation about that concept. I'm surprised that the reaction has been as negative as it's been, and not as in my personal reaction, which is dismissive, which is basically to say, first of all, I didn't like the fact that when it broke that he declined to talk to the media. But then when he did talk to the media, I thought it'd be better if he didn't say anything because I didn't believe almost anything he said. And I would have appreciated if he came out and said the truth, which is, a year ago, I didn't have much leverage. I was coming off a terrible injury. I didn't have a year in which I wasn't playing that great, even before the injury. And certainly there was certainly concerns about my age. And so I signed this deal, and I screwed up. I signed a deal that I vastly outperformed. I should have either bet on myself, or if indeed I did say to the Steelers, I'm going to go out and make all pro, I should have put in some sort of escalator clause into that if I did go out and make all pro. Instead, he signed a deal that guaranteed the $16 million he had remaining on his deal at the time. That was the Steelers' concession. We're in. And then the rest of the deal was structured so as if he were worth keeping, he would know almost immediately. That's why the roster bonus was set to pay him in March. If he were worth keeping, he would find out very quickly. And obviously he's worth keeping after what happened last season. He was tremendous. Mm-hmm. And he was a very important part of the Steelers' success on defense. No one's debating that. And I have no problem with him not practicing right now because he doesn't need practice. And I have no problem with him getting more money because he's worth more money. But I do have a problem with not being wholly honest about how we came to this position, which is he and his representation, or his representation and him listening to his representation, or he told his representation, here's what I want. Whatever it was, the mechanics of that are only known to them. Last summer, they screwed up, and they didn't account for the possibility that he would star in 2024. They basically accounted for the possibility that he would be worth keeping, which he is and will continue to be, hopefully. But I don't like the fact that that's how it's worked from that end.
So here's my problem with what you said there. My problem is I agree with almost all of it. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to do this from a devil's advocate point of view, but I'll try just for the sake of conversation here. I agree with most of your premise on just about everything you said. One thing I will point out, though, because his agent is taking a lot of heat for the reasons you outlined. From a strategic point of view, if you want to be a dink about it, see, like everything you just said is right, because the strategy where it works is still from the premise of we're going to be dinks about this and take our bonus and tell you later that we're not coming. Okay, so like that's That's the problem here. Unless, he was telling the truth and he advanced this before March, and that would have been the combine. So there's a little wiggle room there. That part I don't necessarily disbelieve, by the way, Mike. I don't think he's maybe lying about that. And even the whole thing about when they laughed at me about making the Pro Bowl, that's a straw man. I don't think that Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin and Art Rooney laughed in his face when he said he's making the All-Pro team or the Pro Bowl or whatever. I think he's building a straw man there, and I think he's talking about the general public, the general perception more than anything. Nobody gave me a chance. Maybe he was around Hines Ward a little too long early in his career. The one area where I will say, though, that this deal is structured well, if they want to be difficult about it is very hard for the NFL to recoup signing bonuses from players, especially under the circumstances that we're outlining here. And he's only going to get, I heard, $79,000 per game check.
Sounds right.
It's awful easy for him to miss these games.
Right.
From a economic standpoint, he's not losing anything by not playing. Right. Now, the fines on top of it, if he hadn't held in and he decided to hold out, would have been significant, but they didn't fine him for holding in. They said, you're here, good enough. So, if he gets fines on top of not getting game checks, then that's one thing. I don't know if it works that way, but I do know that the fines are not, the money he is losing is not punitive if he decides to not play. So from that standpoint, it was smart. The other devil's advocate angle I'll take to what you said here is, the only thing I'm not on the Steelers' side about with this is I do have a problem with their track record of, we're going to be difficult on the guys who we know we can be difficult with, like Cam, who's, Walter Payton Man of the Year, renowned good guy, captain team guy. They played hardball with Ben when Ben knew his legacy was going to be the quarterback of the Steelers and he didn't want to go anywhere else at his age. They played hardball with him. Same sort of mentality with Hines. Meanwhile, they just moved AB's money around to keep him shut up because they didn't want to deal with it. They dealt with James Harrison falling asleep in meetings and leaving games early and shipped him out in the middle of the season so he could go play for New England just because they didn't want to deal with it. Like, they're harder on the guys who are better Steelers. Like, that I've got a problem with between him and Boswell. So I will, kind of go to Cam's camp on that one. But the general premise I agree with you on, and I'll speak to a bigger thing on this. His story and Chris Boswell's story indicate to me, I'm so over the players whining and complaining about, well, it's a one-way street. They can cut us. This is the only currency we have. This is the only avenue that we can take to not play because we don't have guaranteed deals. Okay, fine. We'll do it that way. Want a hockey salary cap where it's 5 years? This is what you get no matter else who signs while you are still on year 2 of a 5-year deal because you wanted 5-year guarantees? Tough. Can't renegotiate. That's how they do it in the NHL. You want that? We'll do that. You want to go year to year? Great. 1-year deals for everybody. Let's pretend it's college. Open transfer portal. You can go wherever you want. You want to do that? Great. But I'm sick of this. I'm sick of the whining and complaining about how it's a one-way street when actually the players at this point have more clout than the teams do.
Well, in terms of the one-way street, he's already been paid for the work he'll do in the 2025 season. He has been paid. And if he all of a sudden doesn't show up, well, which way is the one-way street flowing then? Because he has gotten the roster bonus in March. Hey, I pointed out on Twitter the other day that if he'd taken that roster bonus and put it in a CD or a series of CDs, however he wanted to do it, paying 4%, or let's say a money market where you could put an unlimited amount in, he would, at a 4% rate, he would already have made more than $250,000. So just cashing his check, he could have made $250,000. So the one-way street is flowing his way. Look, like I said, I think this will get fixed. I think it'll get done. And I see your point about the fact that they are harder on the Steelers. I never thought they were that hard on Ben. I just thought they were realistic with Ben, and they were realistic with Troy.
Well, no, okay, maybe harder was a bad way to phrase it. How about they are more willing to bend their own rules. Like, this is an easy thing to do. You just take some of his money, some of his bonus money from next year and advance it to this year, which is ostensibly what they did with AB.
That's what they did. Right. And that's what they'll do, Tim. That's what they'll do.
They just did it because they knew AB was going to be a pain in the ass, like, really hard to deal with, but they needed him there. And it's kind of the same thing with Cam, but they figure, this is Cam. He'll give it up eventually, and he can't stay away. He talked about going to Cleveland last year, and he signed a deal that was a cupcake deal. So they're kind of taking advantage of it. And the same thing, when I talked about Ben, he was coming off a bad year. He wanted one more year to play. He probably wanted two, and they didn't give it to him. And, he's still bitter to some degree about that with some people within the organization. It depends on the day. Other days he seems fine with it, but that's neither here nor there. And we got to, move on and catch up here a little bit. But I think I agree with a lot of what you said about Cam at the Open there. So there are different ways to view it. There are different ways to look at it. I think people have examined it. We barely even talked about Boswell, but I think Boswell's in the same camp. I mean, you're talking about a guy who's the best kicker maybe in all of football, and he was the fourth highest paid of the four teams at his position in his own division last year.
That one's got to be fixed.
They could fix that one too easily. It's like, he makes 1.7% of the cap. It's not like you're going to change your overall cap structure by giving him more money and making him the highest paid guy at the position in the sport, even if you wanted to go that far. It's just breaking the rule of 2 rules out, or 2 years out.
Let's point out, they have cap space available. Even if they wanted to go to get another receiver, they still have cap space available, or another safety, whichever.
Yeah, maybe not McLaurin.
Plenty of room. So they can afford to pay those guys, and they will. But the machinations of it are not elegant.
Well, my big picture state of the Steelers right now, maybe it's not so much the state of the Steelers, it's the state of the fan base. Okay, look, I know the climate of the day. I know the politics of the day. I don't need to go down the vaccine rabbit hole here, but I do think we all need a flu shot, and we need a Latrobe flu shot, because I think way too many people have contracted the Latrobe flu this year. I mean, we get this every year, but it is at a pandemic level this season. And again, not to draw the analogy too thick, I don't care what Aaron Rodgers says on Joe Rogan's podcast. I really don't. I don't care what he thought about coronavirus or anything else. I really don't. I only care about the football aspect. And to hear how people have changed their opinion, a lot of people who I know who were staunchly in the no Aaron Rodgers camp are changing their minds based on how he's talked to the media 4 times is blowing my mind. Because number one, how he's talked to the media has nothing to do with how he's going to play or how healthy he is going to remain for 17 games, if those are your 2 concerns. And number 2, what he's saying to the media now is easy. Like, everybody was saying the same stuff about Russell Wilson a year ago. Oh, he's an adult in the – look at how smooth and polished he is. I know it's kind of a phony baloney thing, but, man, he could talk the paint off a wall. And, he's selling that, and he's around his teammates. And even though he's injured and the calf is bothering him, he's out there. Everything was positive and roses about Russell Wilson, too. And that carried over even for 7 games when they were 6-1 under him when he started to play. Like, the defense thing, like with Mike Tomlin saying that this is going to be a historic defense, and Juan Thornhill saying it could be the best defense of all time, and some people believing it. Like, look.
How many people are believing it, Tim?
Well, I don't know. I mean, like I see a lot of people that are kind of like, they're trying to talk themselves into why it's a legit thing, based largely on the secondary, based largely on Ramsey. How Ramsey's presence is going to change everything. But that corner position, if you even want to look at the teams that Tomlin coached, forget about Knowles' teams, forget about Cowher's teams, even the 2 defenses, the 2010 and 2008 defense that were epic in Pittsburgh. The only unit that I look at and I say it's better here this year than it was then is the cornerbacks, maybe, if Porter develops and Ramsey and Slay still have something. I just think that's blown out of proportion, personally.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. The idea that they will be a historic defense should be something that we start talking about after their first or second in total D in week 7. I mean, that's when you should start talking about.
Actually, you should probably start talking about in week 12. If you saw the story I posted at Trib Live, like, they have a real track record and history of the defense sloping off at the same time the team starts to in general when they've
Yeah,
had
and
these
part of
December
that,
lulls.
part of that has been the injury factor. I mean, you think back to 2020 when they were undefeated, and then you lose two starting linebackers, and then you're not the same defense anymore. So that's part of the reason why you really shouldn't talk about those things. Because in 2020, when they were undefeated, when they were 11-0, they were legit. People look back on that year and forget how great that defense was when they had all four starting linebackers. I mean, that was not okay. It wasn't Lambert, Hammond, Russell, but that was a pretty great core of linebackers for that time in Steelers history. And they lost 50% of it, and they started to lose games. They couldn't dictate anymore as a result. And so that's why this kind of conversation is not helpful. I think to say from Tomlin's perspective, I think we can be pretty good, maybe even special. I think you can stop it there, and that's good enough. And because then you're setting a bar for your team that they should have as a goal to be really good, maybe special. That's a fair bar for you to set this defense at. And then if health prevails, and if the corners hold up, and Peyton Wilson continues to improve, and if you get really good defensive play on the line from your two rookies, yeah, okay, then maybe you can be a notch above that. But when I heard this and people are starting to try to compare it to 2008 or 2010 or whatever, I mean, they haven't even played a exhibition game together. They haven't even played an exhibition game together. They haven't even to be able to try to project something like that is preposterous. Let's just cool it. I totally agree with you. I'm inoculated, Tim. I'm good. I want to see them play real games, and a lot of them, before I start talking about what their legacy will be.
All right, let's get to our keys to victory. I'll start off here. I'll go with my offensive key first, and that's Caleb Johnson needs to be further along than what we saw last week. I was not impressed to the point where I'm saying, okay, this is going to be the running back who can be counted on for the most carries in the season and have this be a successful rush attack, which I think is the approach that a lot of fans and media members are taking to the season, which is Warren might start out the year, but at some point in the middle of the season, it's going to be Caleb Johnson carrying the mail for the most part. If that's the case, I think he needs to be further down the track than what he is at this point, what we saw in week 1 against the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah, the problem that Najee had, when there was a hole, he ran through it and he ran hard. But the problem he had was if there wasn't a hole, and that's what the play called for him to go through the hole between the guard and the tackle, and there wasn't one, he still ran between the guard and the tackle and got no yards. That was his problem for 4 years. We saw something like that from Caleb in rep 1. Okay, so as you go forward, what do you do relative to that? Because I don't have much doubt that he can get through a hole. He's quick, he's fast, he's strong. The question is, can you adjust? I'm not talking about necessarily reversing the whole field and going the opposite way, but adjust from hole A to hole B. If hole A is closed and hole B is promising, you try to hit it and at least get something out of it. That's what's been missing in the primary ball carrier's circumstance. With Jalen, I don't think we've really had an opportunity to get a feel for what he would be, because he's never been the RB1. So we'll see over the course of time what he is. But whether or not Caleb Johnson becomes the primary ball carrier as the season comes along, he still has to be what I said.
What about your offensive key?
Yeah, I'm going right back to where I was a week ago, because in the absence of that second receiver, and with Austin absent as well, I think that the idea has to be that they will be looking for Roman Wilson to be productive again. 2 catches, 24 yards first time out, one of them a beautiful 19-yarder. Everything in camp indicates he's made progress as well. I read something about how he came to camp too heavy last year. And now is lighter. And I don't understand why he would have come out of he said he came out of the combine and felt like he was too light, too weak, not strong enough for the NFL. And so he trained to that. And it's like, well, why didn't you talk to the Steelers guys and train to what they wanted you to do? That part I didn't understand, but I did understand that he certainly looked like an NFL receiver in his limited exhibition appearance. I want to continue to see that.
Yeah, and I guess for my defensive key, I don't know how much of this we're actually going to see, but I do want to see eventually how that secondary is going to come together. If that's the crux of why this defense is going to be historic, then I would like to see it. The extent to which we get to witness that, whether it be in terms of player participation or what they unveil in their scheme, is probably going to be limited. But maybe I'm just dovetailing with my own thought from before, which is, and I know I'm not going to get a huge slice of this, even if most of their players play, and I don't think it's going to be the case. But, if we see anything that gives us a hint that this really could be a dynamic secondary, then maybe I'll change my mind and soften my approach to what I said before and jump on the bandwagon about how great.
You won't.
No,
and you shouldn't. But you got to be discerning here. But you want to see signs, no doubt.
Yeah. What about your defensive key?
Yeah, for me, it's we saw good play, especially from Y.A. Black, solid from Derek Harmon. The first priority for the defensive line is you don't go backward. That's the first priority, because as we saw in Baltimore, when they started to get pushed off the ball in the second half, that things really disintegrated from that point. So the first priority is don't get pushed back. But then the next priority is, how about you pushing them back? And that's what we want to see in week 2, preseason week 2, from Y.A. Black and Derek Harmon. Push them back if you can. And it's a good line they're going against. So I'm not sure how much of that we're going to see. And maybe just not getting pushed back will be a win. But we'd like to see progress.
My bonus key is the great Pittsburgh punt-off continues.
Yes.
I mean, Skylar Thompson and Mason Rudolph were just too damn good last week. They didn't give the position battle that everybody cares about a chance to breathe. There's going to be some times where I think Tomlin's going to tell the quarterbacks, hey, take a knee on 3rd and 4. We got to figure out if it's Cam Johnston or if it's going to be Corliss Waitman, because they had 3 punts last week, and 2 of them were boomers over 50,
yes.
1 each.
Yes.
So more of the punt off. I'm looking for. You're going to hear people cheer when the punters come on, because that's the position battle everybody's waiting for.
And it's nice to have. It's the good thing about that position battle is that it's not between, will one of them ever play like an NFL punter? It's, hey, we got really 2 good options here. How do you decide between them? So that's great. For me, this is less consequential. But Ben Sauls was such a terrific kicker for Pitt. He had a great career there. I was in the building, in the stadium, when he kicked the 58-yarder against Cal last October. It was a beautiful day for college football, and it's a great day for Ben because his kicks won the game for the Panthers. I would like to see him continue to kick well, either to position himself to be available if something were to happen to Boswell. And certainly we don't want that to happen, but if it did, like to see Ben be available, or perhaps catch on with another team, or at least be one of those speed dial calls for another kick when somebody else goes out and shanks 4 in a row. Hey, let's get Ben Sauls on the line, because I loved his Pitt career, and he certainly seems like a fine young man. It'd be great to see him have another day.
Well, maybe somebody who should be speed dialing him is the Pirates, because he won the home run hitting contest. You'd like to see a little of that at PNC Park. Although I didn't realize this, there is a point system for the home run contest. Did you know that? It's not just hitting them over the fence at St. Vincent. There's like lines in the outfield. So it's 2 points if you get it beyond the first line. It's 3 points if you get it beyond the second line, and then it's a home run for 5 points or something like that. And he won it in a point off. He Floyd Mayweather this thing, and won it that way. Whereas Ben Skoranek apparently hit a home run that traveled over the fence, over the cart path, and almost hit a building 400 feet away. So I think for that one shot alone, it should have been Ben Skoranek. But if the place,
so what you're saying is that the Pirates, instead of measuring how far into the outfield you hit, they should have been measuring exit velocity.
Oh no, I don't want to say that. I'm not the biggest exit velo guy, but now you kind of cornered me on that one. But yeah, if Sauls only has warning track power hitting. Does that mean he only has warning track power as a kicker too? Like, that would be my concern. But 58 yards at Acrisure Stadium is 58 yards at Acrisure Stadium. That's a difficult place to kick, and he was a really good kicker at Pitt. And I'm glad the quick dial was there for him to come in as Boz's backup in camp, if nothing else. But yeah, those are some special teams things to watch as well. Again, on the Friday Football Show with myself and Mike DeCourcy, brought to you by Mike's. Meet me at Mike's. Go there before or after the game at Acrisure Stadium on Saturday. Again, Tampa in town this week. Had the scrimmage at Acrisure Stadium in advance of this game. Now let's get to the other sideline, speaking of Tampa. And I'll go first here. My most interesting point from the Bucs is, can the Steelers keep everything in front of them like they did, that bend but don't break that they had last week against Jacksonville? Like, Beanie Bishop gave up passes in front of him that I'm sure he would have liked to have picked off or broken up, but he tackled the catch. I think you saw some of that with Cole Holcomb too.
Yes.
So, like, that's one thing I want to see, if the Steelers can continue to do that and do it effectively, not like how they did it against Kansas City, where they kept it in front of them and Patrick Mahomes didn't beat him over the top, but he also marched the team down the field and scored a touchdown on just about every drive. Like, if they stall them out and they're relying on the Jaguars to kick field goals on every possession, you can still probably win that game. There were 2 12-play drives that they allowed, but with the backups in there, I'm thinking some of that maybe turns into interceptions or negative plays, or the quarterback goes down if TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith are the ones rushing off the edge. But, when the second teamers are in there, keep it in front of you again, because I thought they did that pretty well in the game against Jacksonville.
Yeah, for me, it comes down to Tampa Bay in the first week. I mean, they ran the heck out of the ball in their exhibition victory. They had 87 yards from a fellow named Owen Wright, who had never carried – he's not a rookie. He's been around for a year, but he never had carried the ball in an NFL game, and he rushed for 87 yards last week. They just absolutely blew the ball off the line, and they were third in the league in rushing last year. So it's pretty obvious that it comes down to a terrific offensive line that moves people. And so how do the Steelers hold up against that? That'll be something to watch, because we saw that become a problem late last year, in particular the second Baltimore game, that they weren't able to hold up. It's a little bit different running attack, and it's obviously a different defense without Cam Hayward, but it's still the same challenge. Plug the holes, hold the line, force the offense to beat you over the top. So it'll be interesting to see how the Bucs are able to run the ball against the Steelers.
I'm also interested to see how Larry Foote calls plays, the former Steelers inside linebacker who won a couple of Super Bowls here on that 08 team and the 05 team, which we didn't bring up earlier. But, Larry Foote was always a favorite of mine in the locker room. He's been a defensive assistant in Arizona and now for a couple years in Tampa. So he's going to have the play calling duties in this game for the Bucs. I'll be interested to see how their defense performs with him in charge. And also, this is kind of an interesting matchup that I want to see, because I think Derek Harmon and Keanu Benton are incredibly important players for the Steelers this year, even more important if this thing with Cam does go into the preseason. But on the other side, Graham Barton, the center, was, when the Steelers were in center territory in the draft last year, what's it going to be? Do they go with Barton in the first round? Or they hold out for, I'm blanking on the kid's name now that went to the Raiders from Oregon, and Zach Frazier. They eventually got Frazier, and they were very happy with that. But Barton was the guy that everybody thought could play any position along the offensive line and do it well. And I think his scouting report has kind of been what we've said about Zach Frazier. Good place to start. Maybe there's still more to be had there. I want to see how those two interior guys do against him when they're squared up over him in the 3-4, or, if they've got somebody's got to move the center back. If it's going to be one of those guys, who's it going to be and how do they do? And maybe Black comes into play there too, as you outlined earlier.
Right. I'm interested in Larry Foote as well. If he does call up a blitz and sacks whoever is playing quarterback for the Steelers, does he do that little
squish the bug
foot stomp that he does.
Squish the bug that he used to do. Could he do
yes,
that?
Remind you that his name is Foot. Does he do that? I'll be very curious to see
if
that.
he does that like in the coach's booth, or maybe he's on the field. I don't know if he's in the booth guy or if he's on the sideline guy. I don't know if that changes if he's calling plays or not.
Yes.
But most of the defensive coordinators are on the field. He should do that. That's a good point.
Especially back at Hines. Are you kidding? That was his home, man.
Now I'm thinking about that. If he were to do that and Tampa were to turn into a big sack team or wherever he goes as a defensive coordinator, if they're always cutting to the defensive coordinator to see his sack dance as opposed to the guys who come up with the sack, and you don't see their sack dance, they're going to start to get pissed.
Yeah,
like you don't go to the coach.
Can only do it one time if he ever does.
You ISO on the player.
That's why this is the perfect opportunity, because it's in his building, so to speak.
All right, let's get to our stat pack next. You got anything else in the Bucs, or did you get it all there? Did you cover everything? You're good in the Bucs? All right. Let's get to our stat pack. You want to give me your stat first?
Yeah, for me, the stat of the first week against Jacksonville was the play selection. 38 passes to 25 rushes against Jacksonville. They called passes on 5 of the first 6 first downs of the game while Mason was in the game, Mason Rudolph. And as I was watching that, I couldn't help but think, where was that aggression when they were playing the Bengals in the second game of the 2024 season? This not the second game of the season, but the second Bengals meeting after they had put up 45 points on the Bengals in early December. They get them again in January with a chance to avoid a rematch against Baltimore. And they came out and ran the ball on 11 of 12 first downs, exclusive of the 2-minute drill at the end of the first, and then the late comeback attempt that was engendered by calling 11 first down rushes. I don't understand the Arthur Smith offense now after a season and 1 exhibition game. I'm hopeful that it's more like what we saw in Jacksonville than what we saw in that second Bengals game last year. I believe this from the beginning, that once they signed Aaron Rodgers, that if he were handed a play sheet that said you're going to run the ball 11 consecutive times on first down, that he would just take that play sheet and tear it up, because he's not running the ball on 11 consecutive first downs unless every time they ran it, they got 15 yards, which, as you remember, Tim, I believe they had 1 run longer than 4 yards in that 11 first down. So I want to see this kind of offense more often. If you run the ball on first down and you're getting big yardage, go for it. But if you're not, you can't keep doing that just so you can control the football in your mind and keep the other team's offense off the field. That's not a recipe to win, because in the end, as we saw, after putting 45 points on the worst defense in the NFL, I think in that game they finished up with 16. And they ended up losing. So let's see real aggression continue. Not so much on Friday, on this exhibition game. I don't need to see that. But as the regular season begins, let's see intelligent, aggressive play calling executed by a quarterback who's headed to the Hall of Fame.
Well, it's like what Arthur Smith said. We didn't get DK Metcalf and Aaron Rodgers here to run the wishbone. So hopefully that's the case. If DK Metcalf goes down, though, and they don't have a number 2 receiver in place, they might have to, or they've got to figure out a way to use 3 tight ends. You know, Omar Khan said this week on WDVE, Mike, that he's fine with the receiver room the way that it is. I don't know how you could be. I especially don't know how you could be with Calvin Austin hurt with some injury that's nagging and not going away. And apparently of those guys who are banged up and have dealt with stuff during camp, that's the one that's alarming them the most at this point. And we talked about Roman Wilson already. I understand why he wanted to come into camp a little thicker and bigger, because he's slight. He's not just short, he's slight. And he probably wanted to put a little bit more mass on to take the pounding of 17 games. And I don't know how either of those 2 guys hold up if they are heavily targeted, which they have to be if this whole 3 tight end thing doesn't work out. But, you know, I do believe that they're going to try to use the tight ends as the secondary option after DK Metcalf, because they have to.
Right.
Like maybe that's why Omar feels okay with the receiver room and is so adamant about it, because it's down the list of priorities. But I'm telling you, we saw how bad it looked when George Pickens got hurt last year.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's going to look even worse than that potentially if DK goes out and Calvin Austin is limited.
Well, you too do, but you have to remember they do have now Jonnu Smith, and that changes the math a little bit. If you
do you believe that the tight ends as a secondary option can work? Can that work for you? Do you think?
Oh, absolutely, it can. I mean, we've seen that happen with other NFL teams. The Patriots of the 2010s are not the only example of that. There are other teams that have used that.
I guess, is a decent example. Yeah, with Andrews and Likely.
Right. So I think that it can work, especially if you have somebody like Smith who has proven that he can put up big numbers in a wide open offense. I mean, 88 catches is 88 catches for anybody. And enough of those were turned into touchdowns and first downs that it wasn't just he was throwing the ball directly over the line. He was catching it and getting 4 yards. I mean, there was a significant percentage of first downs and touchdowns for his 88 catches a year ago. And that doesn't even take into account Freiermuth. We've talked very little about Freiermuth, who's been a solid receiver his entire career. And what we've seen in the growth of Darnell Washington. What a great catch he made for the touchdown from Mason in the first exhibition. All the camp buzz has been about how what we saw in Jacksonville was not an aberration. It might even have been not nearly his best. So I think it can work. Would it be great to have a young first-round wideout from last year's draft? Yeah, it would have been, but they needed Derek Harmon more, even more. And so they have to make do with what they have. Obviously, the wide receiver situation as it stands, it's only palatable if Austin is healthy and ready to go on day one. Or that if he's not, then you have every reason to be a bit worried, because even if Wilson does what we've talked about earlier, you still need Austin to be out there when you go to three wides.
Well, I'll give you a couple numbers here for my stat pack. It's one batch of numbers. 0, 1, and 1 are my stats. No turnovers, 1 pre-snap penalty, 1 injury from week 1 against the Jaguars. Give me that in a preseason game.
Yes.
Every time. And I think that's why Mike Tomlin was as happy as he was coming out of that game the way that they did. I mean, there are other things to be happy about. I haven't started talking about Mason Rudolph. You alluded to him earlier. I'm going to get to that momentarily. But no turnovers in a preseason game. 1 pre-snap penalty of, I think it was the 6th that they got. And then 1 injury to a down-the-line cornerback. I mean, you'll take that every day to start the preseason. If you can replicate that against the Bucs on Saturday night, God bless you. Mission accomplished.
Yeah, especially the injury part. I as I said before, every week that goes by, you're hoping for no more injuries, whether it's camp or exhibition games. I hear people talk about still eliminating exhibitions. And I don't understand that, because guys get hurt in practice too. So do we eliminate practice? I mean, probably more, if you looked at it by the end of training camp, and I know this is partly a product of volume, but more NFL players will start the season on the injured list because of practice than because of exhibition games. And so you can't eliminate every opportunity to get injured. That's just not how it works. I don't think that there is any great preponderance of injuries in exhibition games, but it is a risk, because every time you go on a football field, there's a risk of an injury. And so you certainly want to come out of these games and go into the next week as healthy as possible. So even I love the fact that there were no penalties or only one of them. The no turnovers, you don't want them, but that can happen in an exhibition game. It's better if you don't have them. But again, that's really more of a regular season stat for me. But that the penalties is suggestive of that you're executing, getting on and off the field, that you're getting the right personnel in, and that they understand their assignments. So that's really positive. And then, of course, the injury is somewhat luck, but you want that good luck every week.
Time now for Who Will Take Flight. This is where we talk about who we think is going to be a star of the game for the Steelers and or for the opponent. And I also remind you about flight night at Mike's. On Monday, I had myself a flight earlier in the week. Mike, I had cornbread beer. I've never had cornbread beer before. It's pretty good. It's kind of like a blonde, but little bit nuttier, a little bit meatier, and it was pretty good. I would suggest finding that at Mike's if you go. And I'm going to start with Mason Rudolph, who will take flight again in this game. I'm just looking forward to seeing the ovation he gets when he gets out there because, where things, I think, started to turn for Mason and people in Pittsburgh started to treat him like a human being was after the Jacksonville game, that first preseason game, where I think all of Pittsburgh realized how much of a bunch of jerks they had been to him the night before when they were booing him in a preseason game because he wasn't Kenny Pickett. It went from Trubisky to Mason to Pickett, and everybody got on Mason's back, and the first drive didn't go well. I think somebody dropped the ball and somebody missed a blocking assignment, and he got sacked, and everybody was acting like it was his fault. And then, once people analyzed what they had just watched and the reaction to it is like, oh, we're being a little hard on this guy. This is a little unfair. He just got bypassed twice on the depth chart. And then everything else that went on from there. How many times he got turned loose to free agency and came back? How many times he saw other guys promoted in front of him that didn't end up being any good? And then he comes out and saves a season and wins 3 games in a row and gets into the playoffs. Leaves, comes back again, and was excellent in that game against the Jaguars, has been great throughout training camp. And I asked Darnell Washington, because he did play with Washington for 1 year, Washington's rookie year before Mason went to Tennessee and is now back. I said, did you notice anything different about him when he came back from Tennessee? What's different about Mason? And he said, I was expecting, no, he's the same guy. It's just, he's in a good situation. I was expecting an answer like that. And right away, without pausing, Washington says he's throwing the ball harder. He's got better ball placement. His drops are better and his technique is better. I was like, oh, okay. Well, I guess there is something to it then. So again, I thought, okay, this is a third-year guy who only played with him for 1 year. Maybe he's making a little much about this. So I asked Freiermuth, who knows him pretty well and has worked with him extensively. I said, are any of these points right from Darnell? He said they're all right. And then I went to Tomlin. I said, the 2 tight ends are saying this. What do you say? He said, well, I think his arm strength is actually pretty much the same. He's always had a good arm, but I will agree on the ball placement.
Right.
So, there's something to this. He is better now, according to everybody that he's playing with, than when he left to go to the Titans. So I don't know if that's just him working on his own game, if he got coached up better there and he's a better player coming back now, if this is his own doing, if this is Tom Arth in the offseason, now he's got his hands on him here, whatever you want to say, whoever you want to give credit to, give it to him, but give some to Mason. Give Mason credit for making himself a better quarterback.
I think some of it as well is comfort with his circumstance, because it really, if you look at his trajectory throughout his time with the Steelers, drafted in the 3rd round, was not a popular 3rd round pick, obviously, with what Ben said about wanting more help instead of someone to sit behind him. So that didn't go great. Then he all of a sudden gets dropped into the circumstance week 2 of the 2019 season when Ben gets hurt against the Seahawks in the home opener. So that's a lot, and they were expected to be good that year, and all of a sudden you're having to cope with that, and then some of it goes great and some of it doesn't go great, and a lot of what happened to his first opportunity to start was wrecked by the hit against Baltimore. And then he comes back after Duck has the team for a little while, and all of a sudden he gets hurt again. So there's never really been a smooth trajectory for him, but he comes back now and he knows what he is. He's a backup quarterback, and he embraces that role. He did not sign here thinking that he would be the starter, or he wouldn't have signed the deal he signed. He signed to be a backup quarterback and to see where that took him. And I think in embracing that role, and then ultimately with Aaron Rodgers, he looks at that and says, he doesn't look at that and say, well, why is he starting instead of me? He's Aaron Rodgers. Until he proves he's not Aaron Rodgers anymore, he should be starting ahead of me. So I think all of that allows him to be more comfortable in his circumstance. I talked to him briefly at mini camp, and he seemed so at ease. There was just none of that discomfort that he had through a lot of his earlier time. And I think a lot of that comes from, hey, the last time you guys saw me, I won you a bunch of games, A, and B, I know exactly what my role is now, and I'll be ready if my role needs to be expanded for whatever reason, but I'm good with where I am.
Keep in mind, too, Mike, this is the first time he's played at Acrisure Stadium since that Cincinnati game that started that run. So, like, he had that moment, he had that day, but he never got to play here again after that. He went on the road and won in Seattle. They went on the road and they won in Baltimore, and then they went on the road and lost in the playoffs against Buffalo. So you never got the applause of running on the field and hearing the fans say thank you for that. Maybe a little bit running off the field when they beat the Bengals, but not since then. So he's had 4 road games and a season in between where he played somewhere else. So, like, this, I think, should be fun for Mason, and I hope he really enjoys the moment. Who do you have taking flight for the Steelers?
Yeah, for me, it's Caleb Johnson. I think he's going to be better this week. He can't be worse. I think it was 8 carries for 12 carries for 20 yards. It's got to be better than that. It's okay that he wasn't outstanding his first week, because one of the most underrated elements, as I've covered athletics, mostly in college, but also in professional for more than 40 years, one of the most underrated elements of how players perform is confidence. I always say that if you are asked to run fast in a straight line, you're going to run fast in a straight line if you have speed. But a lot of times, if you ask guys to, okay, all right, you've got to go out and you've got to run, but we're not going to tell you where you have to run, then they won't be fast because they don't know where they have to go. So this confidence level that he should have now, that has to build. And off the first game, he didn't have a reason to be confident, but some of that is, what should I do here? What should I do in this circumstance? And I'm sure that after all that went up on film, and they went back to the South Side and looked at the tape, and they said, okay, here's what you should have done here. And now he'll know, because he only knew what the play call was, but now he'll know what they want him to do when the play call fails, because it has failed for him. It wasn't just him failing, the play call failed. They didn't block it. The other team read it, whatever it was, but the holes weren't there where they were supposed to be there on all of his carries. When they were, he had a couple of good runs, but the majority of them, the play calls didn't work for whatever reason. And now he's got to know what to do to adjust when they don't work. If we're just going to go through this, as I mentioned before, where if the play doesn't get blocked, it doesn't work. Look, you're not going to turn every unblocked run into a positive play, but you got to turn some of them into it, or you're no better than than the guy you replaced, and you're no better than the average running back. You're certainly not worth a high draft pick and eventually a plus second contract.
All right, let's go around the league here. We got about 10 minutes left before we get to some listener emails and predictions as well. Around the league notes, speaking of running backs and speaking of the guy that Caleb Johnson is partially replacing, Najee Harris with Los Angeles, with the Chargers now. He's starting to work out on his own, starting to run with a weighted vest. He's trying to come back from that eye injury. Also, Myles Garrett of the Browns was busted for going 120 miles an hour. This is like his 8th speeding violation since he got drafted by the Browns, Mike. I don't know if you heard this angle of the story, but as soon as TJ Watt found out about this, he wanted to go 120 miles an hour and get a $300 fine. I swear I read that somewhere.
I love it. That's great.
But yeah, I mean, come on. With Shadur already getting 2 violations, like, what is Shadur like? If Garrett can do it, why can't Shadur think he can do it too? And like, you are what contract did he get? $132 million investment. You flipped your Porsche 3 times once, going 120 in roughly the same place. Like, what more of a wake up call do you need to not do that?
grow up. I mean, just grow up. It's ridiculous. If you're in this circumstance where and also, where are the people that should take his license? Why do you have a license?
Why has he still got a license? What? I know he can afford the insurance. That's the unfortunate part. He can keep paying the insurance.
No matter what they charge, he can afford it. But come on, 8 speeding violations in a very short window is I don't care. Yeah. And I don't care doesn't work in society. If you don't care, you're going to hurt somebody.
Last note I'll give you from around the league, and this kind of leaps off the same point we're talking about Mason Rudolph and how well he and Skylar Thompson played. A lot of quarterbacks played well. These defenses are so vanilla. And the passing games are worked so hard in training camp. That's why I think some of the passing games are in front of the run games now. The run games have to play catch up because they work the passing games so much, and the defenses are so vanilla. Fields, Wilson, Mitch Trubisky, all those former Steeler quarterbacks, they were all Shadur. They were all pretty good in their debuts.
Yes. Shadur, I was commenting to someone about how we're based on his first exhibition game, how they're all already measuring the distance from Cleveland to Canton. You know, it's not very far.
He get his number retired like he did in Boulder.
With Miles driving, he could get there in minutes.
Actually, you know what? Like, I shouldn't make fun too much. The last speeding ticket I got was coming home from Canton when I went to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I wasn't going 100 miles an hour, though. I can tell you that.
Yes, for sure.
What do you have in terms of league notes? Anything else that?
Yeah, for me, James Cook holding in for a while, got a new deal up in Buffalo, so the process can work for the player. And again, for a running back of his quality, he needed to be out there taking reps about as much as I did. At the John Gruden suit against the NFL, I think, is really interesting. I don't know what it's going to come of it, but it is being allowed to proceed. The NFL wanted it dismissed. Judge ruled that it can go forward. So Discovery, I don't know how much we'll be able to see of that, but it's going to go to Discovery, if not all the way to court. So I think that's an interesting development. I'm very curious to see where that ends up. And then I saw a note that says the 49ers are looking for Brandon Ayuk to be back around week 6. It's a shame for him, a fine player. I never thought a player at the level that he was going to be compensated if the Steelers acquired him, and he eventually was by the 49ers. That was, even though they wanted to have another wide receiver, I'm glad that trade didn't happen because I never believe. If he were here, he might not have gotten hurt and all that. I'm just talking about him as a player. I hope he returns to the level he was before when he's healthy. But I don't think that level was commensurate with the kind of contract he received or the interest and the price that would have needed to be paid if the Steelers acquired him. I think the Steelers are in better position with DK Metcalf and having gone through the final chapter of the prior year's drama. I think they're in better shape than if they had spent all the assets it would have been necessary to acquire Ayuk.
Let's get to some listener viewer feedback. A couple messages that I got along the way. 412 PSU on your topic of conversation about James Cook. Actually, this is about Cam. I'm sorry. He says, if Cam was so confident he was going to be an all-pro, why wasn't that negotiated into his contract? Seems more likely that Cam surprised even himself that he had gas in the tank. The Steelers took a gamble on extending him after 2023. He should be grateful that they did. That really go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, that's not correct. They didn't gamble anything. The only minimal gamble that they spent was on guaranteeing his salary for last year, and it wasn't really a guarantee because they knew they wanted to give him another shot. So I don't agree. I agree with a lot of what he said or they said because I don't know if it was a guy or a lady, but I don't agree with the idea that they gambled on him because if all they had to do was say, like if he'd had a poor year last year, the roster bonus was coming in March. They said, Cam, I think it's time to retire. If you disagree with us, then move on.
The fact that he gave in as he did, I think is part of the reason they're playing hardball with him now.
Yeah. I think everybody involved was hopeful that he would be productive last year, not a star. And that includes Cam. He could say what he said about what he told them, but he didn't sign a contract that indicated he believed that. If he believed it, you either sign a 1 year, you either stay on the 1 year that you had and dare them to cut you, and they wouldn't because they didn't have anybody to replace him and they didn't need the cap space, or you sign a deal that says, if I'm this good, here's what you do for me. He didn't do either. So he was basically in the same mindset that they were. He wanted to have a good year in 24. If he did, he wanted to be sure that they would bring him back. That was all he was asking for. And if he had a good year in 25, he wanted to know they would bring him back in 26. That's what that contract said. And he didn't have much leverage to get better, but he certainly could have gotten inserted in there. If I'm a star, pay me like one, or pay me more like one. He talks about being the 22nd highest paid DT in the game. Okay. How does he rank among 37-year-old DPs? I bet he's
That's
one.
Part of it. That's part of it. Yeah, exactly. Let's get to chops. I think all these are about Cam. Cam seems to forget the long-term contract he just negotiated last year. If he had discussions about compensation coming off an all-pro year, it should have been written into his contract. We are also extremely deep and young at his position. Cam is playing with fire. We don't know if they're deep. That's the thing. No. We don't know if they're deep yet. We know they're young. They are young, but we don't know if they're deep yet because we don't know if those guys are good.
Yeah, I agree. I don't agree with playing with fire because I think he knows. The worst it can do is say, if they said no, you can't have any money. The worst that he could do is say, okay, I'll just play for what I got. I mean, so he's not really playing with fire. And if he doesn't, or he could take the money that they gave him in March and dare him to take it back. I guess he could do that, but then he would ruin the anger that we see now that will all go away when this all gets resolved. That anger would escalate, and all the great work he's done. And I'm not just talking about charitable work, but I'm talking about building himself up to be a voice in the community, football and non-football, over the next 20, 25, 30 years, whatever. That would be wrecked. So do you really think he would do that? I don't think he would do that.
This comes from Blue Dot 8892. He says Jaylen Warren needs to hold in now that Cook got paid. You mentioned Cook earlier. Like, that's what the Roonies are concerned about. Like, if they give the money to Cam and they give the money to Boz, then who's next in line? Is it going to be right. Jaylen Warren? I mean, we can get silly about this. I don't think Warren knows he doesn't have the clout to do that. Those two guys have the clout to do it, and they have the resume to do it. But, I was joking that if they cave in on both Boz and on Hayward, then both punters should agree to hold out at the same time. And then that way the Steelers will be forced to sign both of them. And that way they neither lose a job. And think about the premise. Oh, Danny Smith could go crazy with this, Mike. Which one's going to punt? Which one are they going to snap it to? It could be like putting two goalies in the net at the same time, like Murray and Fleury. Forget the punt off. They're both going to be on the roster.
Yeah, I like that. Have them both do that. That would be an entertaining scenario. I think it's very clever what he said, but Warren has to be that guy before he can be paid like that guy. Remember, James Cook has been that guy.
Let's get to one more. Chad says that Roonies are weak and he will cave. There's a little difference between how they've given money, tons of money to everybody else, like TJ and some of the other guys that we've talked about in this situation. These are their hard and fast principles of we don't negotiate more than 1 year out unless we feel the reason to do it. That's the little ... that nobody ever mentions because of the likes of Antonio Brown and the very unique nature of Tommy Maddox and his situation in 2003. So they've done it before, and I tend to agree with that, at least on the Cam front. I don't know what they'll do with Boz. But at least on the Cam front, I think something is going to get resolved, and they will use the AB example in some way to explain it.
Yeah, for me, I think that what really would be true about that statement, the Roonies aren't weak. They're flush. They have cap space. And again, they have enough cap space to compensate both of those guys at a higher level. And still, if the second coming of Troy Polamalu suddenly became available on the market, they could still go out and sign him. That's not going to happen because he's not out there. But if there were suddenly some opportunity for them to go get some great safety or some great wide receiver, a second wide receiver, they still have the cap space to do that. So that's what this is about. The Rooneys aren't, this is not baseball. This is not about how much of your money in the business you want to spend. You have to spend a certain amount. That's what the cap is about. And when the Steelers signed TJ, they had to spend the money because they were far enough below the cap that they had to hustle to catch up. It's not because they're underspending. It's just because of the nature of the way their contracts have worked and the fact they don't have a highly paid quarterback. And so they kind of needed to sign TJ. And so they don't necessarily need to extend these two guys or enrich these two guys. But for the sake of the football team, they can and they will. So I don't look at it as weakness. It's business.
Let's wrap up with a couple predictions here, Mike. I'll go with the Steelers 22-21. I'm going to go a little higher scoring than I did last week based on what we talked about before, how vanilla the defenses are, the ability that the quarterbacks have, regardless of which quarterback it is, to at least move the ball. So I'm going a little bit higher, not quite to where it was in Jacksonville because more defensive players should play and play longer on the front lines for both teams. I've got also Hurleman or Washington. At least one of those two guys will score again. That's what I
think. Prop.
Yes.
There you go. And if Hurleman scores, then we get to see more gymnastics. So that's cool.
Yes. The backflip king. What if Washington could pull that off? Now that would be impressive.
Wow.
That's better than dunking the ball and getting a fine. I will say this. It was impressive. And it was funny. Leave it to Darnell Washington to get a fine for hanging on the rim. A 6'7" guy gets a fine for hanging on the rim.
It's interesting that the way it was explained by Bob and Charlie when he did that was that the NFL is concerned that if you do that, that it will throw the goalpost off and they might have to delay the game.
Right.
And Darnell was complaining about it after the game. If there's anybody that could move that goalpost by dunking on it, it is Darnell Washington. He is in the list of human beings who could do it and who would move the post if they did. Darnell Washington is number one.
Well, Tony Gonzalez did it, right? Didn't he? Did he delay the game when he dunked once? And
yes.
He actually played basketball. So
yes, it did happen. But
did you cover him ever? I actually saw him play in person in the Carrier Dome in 96 or 7 when he was with Cal. It was Cal, UNC with Antoine Jameson and Vince Carter, DeJuan Wagner in Louisville, and then I think it was Freeman. What was Freeman's first name with Texas? Reggie Freeman in Texas. That was the Sweet 16 Elite 8 that I saw in the Dome that year. That was a good region.
Well, we're talking about tight ends. I was thinking about the same when Antonio Gates.
Gates. Yes, I saw him play as well.
Because I was at the Pitt game that they lost in the Sweet 16 to Antonio Gates. So yep. I was there for that. When they were talking about how he never played college football, I was like, but some of us saw him hoop, and he was a heck of a hooper. I'm going to go again. I'm 0-for-1. But I'm going to pick the Steelers to lose again. This time 24-16. Concern about whether they can stop the run. Cam's not there. This is an excellent running football team. Can they control that part of the game? If they can, I'll be wrong. More than likely, but that's the concern, and that's why it's a great challenge. This exhibition game is a great matchup. I think the Jacksonville game was a good one to get started with, in part because Jacksonville did play some starters, so that was a good experience for those guys. And now I think this is a great experience for that young D line as well, to go against a team that runs the ball as well as the Bucs do. I think they'll lose, but again, I don't care, especially now that they won't go winless. I don't care whether they win or lose the game. Just like you said, get out healthy, execute well, and whatever happens in the final score. If you bet on this, it's on you. You should never bet on preseason football.
Well, at least not the second week. The first week, you can sometimes find some soft spots with who's playing and who's not. But then again, I was looking for that last week, and it didn't work out.
I don't bet on what I don't understand. That's for sure.
Mike, great job again. We'll do this again next week, and we'll do it, since it's a Friday show, we'll be doing it after the Carolina game. So it'll kind of be a post-game edition, so to speak, of the Friday football show. The game will only be a couple hours old by the time it ends and we go on. So we'll wrap up the Carolina game, and we'll start looking ahead to the regular season. Great job, Mike. We'll do it again then.
Can't wait. Thanks, Tim.
Brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar on the North Shore. Meet me at Mike's.